All right, hello guys. Welcome to episode 13 of Life Lessons in Combat Sports. Once again, Eric Hamidi here with another edition of MMA. And something that I realized I didn't get a chance to talk about in the last episode as far as how this name kind of came up was that I was thinking about themes, and I was thinking of any kind of themes that I could do rather. And I was kind of looking at the calendar and thinking, oh, is there something I can do? Or is there something that I can use? It's just, and then finally it came to me as far as during the month of May. I mean, it was just a given right there. It's just just a slam dunk right there with MMA. So I thought about that and I thought, oh, that'd be a fun thing to do. And just basically that's how the whole idea of themes came about as far as doing April Mania and then doing MMA this month. So I thought that was kind of funny to do. And I guess I should add that when I saw how I came up with it for the month of May, given that this is a combat sports podcast, I thought to myself, is there a way that I can do it so that, is there a way that I could do a wrestling themed month as well? And that's how the whole April Mania came up to me. And just, once again, that was another sort of, given the fact that it's WrestleMania, April Mania, all that stuff. I forgot to mention that last week, so I definitely wanted to take a moment to mention that to everyone here. But in any event, yes, I'm here with another episode, and we're continuing with the theme as far as talking about mixed martial arts, just fighters, events, all this other stuff. So this is one that I've felt kind of strongly about as far as talking about, and the person who I'll be covering today is something that I saw in a Penn documentary from back in 2014. So it's kind of one of those, I guess as a little bit of an intro, it's kind of interesting because it's something that was kind of profound to me back then, but I guess it hits me a lot stronger even now that I'm older and just more so now than it did back then. But I figure I would start by giving a little bit of an overview of Penn as far as who he is. He is a mixed martial artist. He started training in jiu-jitsu in his late teens. He earned his black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu in a matter of 3 years, which is one of the things that he's most well known for. And then in 2001, he made his MMA debut, debuting in the UFC, and quickly rose up the ranks and got a lot of notoriety. And, his nickname was the Prodigy, so people were very high on him from the get-go, so that became his nickname throughout his career. And he fought in the lightweight division. I remember I know that he had a lightweight title fight back in 2002, January of 2002, because of how quickly he was rising up the ranks. And he fought against Jens Pulver, but ultimately didn't win that bout. So over the next couple years, he was fighting more, and just he had another lightweight title fight that ended in a draw. And then this was something that he became rather famous for, was the fact that he in 2004 went up a weight class to welterweight. So lightweight is 155 pounds, welterweight is 170 pounds. He went up a weight class to challenge Matt Hughes, the defending champion, who, if you saw the last episode, I was talking about how dominant of a champion he was during his reign. So he was the one that ended Matt Hughes' first reign as welterweight champion. And that was another thing that he was very well known for, was the fact that he would bounce around between all these different weight classes. Like, he fought at welterweight, but then he also fought in middleweight, and then he also fought at heavyweight in 2005, which is insane to me. And honestly, a lot of that stuff kind of contributes to the legend of Penn, because for a time in his career, the only fights that he lost, aside from that one lightweight title fight in 2002, the only fights he had ever lost were up a weight class. So it just sort of shows you that the only way you could have beaten him was if you had size on him. So that was an amazing feat. And then eventually he reached a point in between 2007 and late 2009, where he avenged his only loss in the lightweight division finally became the lightweight champion of the UFC and defended his title 3 times. And then just by the end of 2009, he was like heralded as like the greatest, one of the greatest in the sport. And it's really true, because given what I just said and the kinds of skills that he had, I mean, man, if he didn't have this fall that he had in his career, I really think he would have gone down as one of the best pound for pound fighters of all time. But what ended up happening after that lightweight title fight, or sorry, let me start over. What ended up happening after that late 2009 timeframe was that he had a title fight as the defending champion in April of 2010 against someone named Frankie Edgar, and he ended up winning that bout, ending BJ Penn's title reign. And then later in the year they had a rematch, but Frankie Edgar won that bout. And then at the end of 2010, BJ Penn ended up getting his last victory in MMA by defeating Matt Hughes in the third bout. And from there, didn't go well for BJ Penn. Like I said, that was the last win he ever got in MMA. And he fought a couple times in 2011. And then at the end of 2011, what seemed like a retirement against what seemed like a retirement at the end of 2011 after his bout with Nick Diaz, he comes back a year later, has another fight at welterweight against Rory McDonald, and gets pretty banged up in that bout. And I mean, this is just where the downfall and the downward trajectory of BJ Penn's career began. And from there, he would go on to lose all of his fights, unfortunately. And I don't know, it's just, this is a weird, I don't know, it's just such a thing. Like, unfortunately, BJ Penn is really a classic example of how the mighty have fallen, because after 2009, he only wins one bout, and then he loses 7 other bouts. And it's, I mean, that's a classic example of, man, he should have stopped a while ago. Because, you know, what ends up happening is that he comes back in 2014, has a third fight against Frankie Edgar, and then that ends up being his last bout. At the time, he ended up retiring, but then he came back 2.5 years later and just continued the losing streak and all that stuff. And it's really unfortunate the place or where BJ Penn is at in his life right now, just given the fact that, I mean, it doesn't seem like he's doing all that well. Like I said, he had that losing streak to close out his MMA career, and then it seems like he's having some, I mean, it seems like he's having some mental hurdles, just because there was a video that came out recently as far as him saying some, you know, I don't even know if disturbing is the right thing, but it just seemed like he was suffering from the effects of CTE. So that was a disturbing thing to see, and it's a little sad to see that when you consider how good of a fighter BJ Penn was. And just really, if he didn't have this bad losing streak, I really feel like he could have been among the top 5 best MMA fighters of all time, like being on the level of a GSP or Anderson Silva, John Jones, Fedor Emelianenko, all those guys. So given the fact that he's saying these rather outlandish things and he's in a bad place in his life, I mean, I guess BJ Penn is more of a cautionary tale these days. But there is one thing that, like I said, there was a documentary on him back in 2014. This was in the lead up to the Frankie Edgar fight. And they made this like hour-long biopic, or this hour-long documentary that covered BJ Penn's career up to that point. It was called Mana. And there was something that in the very beginning of the documentary that BJ Penn says that quite honestly, I feel like is a very good life lesson. And I don't know, it's crazy because when I first saw it, it really hit me hard and just really kind of had an impact on me or made me reflect and think about that and all that stuff. And it's just crazy that now that's even more so true. That's even more true than it was back then. And I don't know, you kind of think about it in a little bit of a different way now that I'm a little bit older. But basically what happens is that in that documentary, BJ, he says, right now my life is pretty simple. I'm not running around. I'm not doing too much things. I've had one fight in the last 2 years, so it's almost like I've been retired for 2 years. I got to work on myself a little, kind of realized that, and this is where the theme of this episode comes in. Kind of realized that, stress itself can take you out. If you let the stress get to you too much and then you lose your title, what was the point about worrying about all that stuff in the first place? And what's interesting is that at the time that I heard that, because this was back in June of 2014, at the time that I heard it the first time, I was kind of going through a little bit of a rough time in my life, or a rough patch, because I was doing some things to try to develop my interpersonal skills and just work on that, develop that, practice that, and it just, long story short, it wasn't going well, or it caused for some bad interactions for me. And I just remember feeling really down about that and almost feeling like really depressed when that happened. And there was a period of a few days at that time where I just didn't have the drive to like do much in my day. I just felt very sad, so it's like anything that I did have to do, I kind of like forced myself to do that. But then, after a few days, I kind of pick myself up and I start being a little more productive with my day. I don't just sit around and, I just thought to myself, okay, I need to do my chores. I need to go out, get some sunlight and all this other stuff. And it was around that time that I saw the Mana documentary, and I heard him say that, and it really had a profound impact on me, or just it really resonated with me because, I've done, I don't know, I've done my fair share of stressing out about things in my life, and honestly, in some regards, I think I kind of do it excessively. And at the time, being 22 and seeing that, how I took that was just the kind of turmoil and the kind of impact that stress can have. And ultimately, hearing BJ Penn say that in the documentary kind of made me want to sort of like take a step back, or just sort of reflect on it and just kind of realize that, yeah, stress is a killer. It's just, I suppose in a way that's kind of a play on people saying to others like, hey, don't worry about things too much, or don't stress too much about it. It's kind of an extension of that, but to be honest, being younger and at the time, it's like I didn't really fully absorb it. It was just a weird thing where it was like I heard that line and I knew it had some value, or I knew what the point of it was and the importance of that was, but I don't know, it was difficult for me to really live my life that way at that time. And how it's kind of hitting me even harder now is because, I've had another decade of my life under me, or just, under my belt. And I guess some of it has to do with the fact that I'm older now. So I guess, time does damage to us all. Father Time is undefeated, so you kind of see a little bit of how it takes a toll on you, or just how much energy it takes out of you and all that stuff, and you kind of reevaluate and see, okay, was it all really worth it, or is it really all worth it? Because, I mean, I don't know, I figured the older you get, the less healthy it'll be for you. And this also kind of extends into just as far as having that enhanced meaning nowadays. It's like it kind of hits me a little harder now, because I mean, if we take just certain endeavors, whether they're professional or personal, it's kind of like sometimes you just get so caught up in achieving that goal that you don't take into consideration what that stress is doing to you and how that's impacting your body and all that stuff. And I mean, if we want to take professional endeavors, if we want to take if we want to take professional endeavors as an example, it's kind of like lately I've sort of been thinking, when you're so caught up trying to achieve the goal in your given field, you don't take into consideration the kind of stress that it puts on you. And I don't know, lately I've just sort of been thinking, because I need to reevaluate some stuff as far as my professional life. I just sort of thought that if you're pursuing a line of work, or you're trying to do a particular thing with your career that's causing you stress, then maybe you need to find a new line of work. Because if we take that quote into consideration, it's kind of like, I don't know, I guess one interpretation of it could be like, hey, even if you do achieve your goal, but it's caused so much, it's wreaked havoc on your body to such an extreme degree, was it really worth it? And I don't know. I guess it also kind of lends itself into the fact that, hey, you spent all this time worrying about a particular thing, and you got it, but was it really worth it? So I guess another thing that, I mean, if you take within the context of that, he's talking about, okay, you lose the championship belt. But I guess if we take if we take a certain, like, if we just take the common person and think about, okay, you worried so much about something, and then it made you lose something, which perhaps you could have kept if you hadn't worried about it. But because you worried about it, you ended up losing that thing, and then you just think, like, I don't know, what was the point of all that? I don't know. I guess they can kind of, I mean, this hasn't really happened to me, but it's just an example I can use, or I can think of, is that if you're working somewhere and you're worried about losing your job, you worry about it, and it affects your performance to the point where maybe you do end up losing your job, and then you're just like, I worried about nothing. I spent my time stressing, and then I ended up losing my job, and it's like, what was the point of it when I had nothing to worry about? I mean, it's really just that sort of self-sabotaging sort of process, or that we sometimes make a mistake doing, in that we worry about losing something, so we end up doing things to make it worse, and then that ends up actually losing it, where if we just left it alone and didn't worry about it, we wouldn't have lost it. Yeah, kind of like I was saying earlier, is that I heard him say that, like, the first time I heard that, I knew it made sense, but I don't know, for whatever reason, you know, I can be a worrywart sometimes, and it's kind of like you still worry about things, and I don't know, you just kind of lose track of it just due to, like, various things, maybe not seeing the bigger picture, or just being too worried about whatever goals you may want to hit, or just, you lose track of it. Inexperience, you're a young person, so you're not experienced with it. But it's kind of like, now when I hear that, I think to myself, I want to live my life more so like that, or I really want to live my life that way. And I've really put into consideration into eliminating the things that cause me a lot of stress. But yeah, that's also, I mean, that's also a way that I've been interpreting it, or kind of like taking it in a new way. Just saying, just basically, yeah, if there's a line of work you're pursuing and it's just, I don't know, that quote has become applicable to what I've been thinking about as far as what I want to do for a career, or what I want to pursue professionally, lines of work I want to be involved in. It's interesting that it kind of took up that development. And it's also kind of interesting because I rewatched that documentary before doing this recording, and man, it really takes me back to that time, like that mid 2010s time period, just where I was at, or just like who I was at that time. It's just, I don't know, I guess it's a heavy case of nostalgia, because it's also, there were there were things in my life that I had at that time that I don't have now. For instance, like being in my 20s, among other things. But you know nothing lasts forever. So I don't know. I guess I just bring that up as one, to share something with y'all, and then also just kind of, you know, kind of expressing how it's kind of had an impact on me. And I think, honestly, I mean, the life lesson here is pretty simple. It's just, you know, you can't let the stress get to you, or you need to really do what you can to eliminate as much stress as possible. And, it's kind of like, I'm just hoping that someone who may hear that doesn't kind of make the same mistake that I made, as far as just not really absorbing it and executing it for one reason or another. I'm not really sure why I made that mistake back in the day. I mean, I don't know. It's just maybe not being as cognizant of that mentality or that lifestyle as I kind of am, or that I'm trying to be now. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm no saint, and I'll still worry about stuff, maybe a little too much. But I don't know. It's just kind of like, at least now, I'm taking that more into consideration as far as how I want my future to play out, I suppose. I mean, at least there's that. And, hopefully someone listening to this can do that a lot earlier than I did. And like I was kind of saying earlier, BJ Penn is really, he's really a case of like how the mighty have fallen. So it's a little hard to see, like, it's a little hard to see looking back, as far as him, having it all together and just being able to articulate his thoughts and stuff, to going to nowadays, where just, you know, the physical toll of his fighting career seems to be really evident right now. And I don't know, it just, the kinds of problems that he's going through, it's also like, kind of makes it, you know, I don't really know if BJ Penn is much of a role model nowadays and all that stuff, or just, a beacon of epitomizing this philosophy. But at least this is the good thing that came out of that documentary, or this is the important thing to take away, and that's a useful thing to take away from that documentary. And that was something that I wanted to share with everybody. It's just, I don't know. As you get older, you kind of care for your body a little more, which is kind of what I do now at work sometimes. Whenever I have to lift heavy things, like, I'll really try to make it a point to lift with my legs, just because, you know, just eventually takes a toll on you, and you're just a little more cautious about your well-being and such. So that's just something that I wanted to mention, something I wanted to talk about, and just hopefully, you guys can take that into consideration and do that in your own lives and live a happier sort of existence. But yeah. That documentary takes me back to that time as far as, you know, what was going on or where I was at in my life at the time, you know. And that whole idea as far as how it applies to one's work life, I mean, that's just an addition or an interpretation or a manifestation of just the overall theme of it of, you know, stress is a killer, and it'll take its toll on you if you let it. And you know, I've made that mistake, and I just kind of don't want to do that anymore. So it's a work in progress, trying to do that. But yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now. And I hope this was of some use to you. Thank you for listening to the episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys can leave comments in the comment section down below, and you can give me a follow on Instagram, Life and Combat Sports, and that takes care of the second edition of MMA, and we'll be back for another one soon. All right, I'll catch you guys on the next one. See ya.